Camila sank into the diner booth, warming her hands with the cup of coffee in front of her. She wasn't even sure where she was anymore. Ever since Winter Moon's Luna ceremony, she had been wandering without direction. It was impossible for her to remain in the pack with that lanky acting all high and mighty. How could life be so cruel to her? One moment she was the envy of every she-wolf hanging off the arm of an alpha, and now here she was, with hardly a duffel bag to her name. When she left, she had taken every bit of jewelry from her room before she was forced to vacate the alpha floor. William wouldn't even look at her or spare her a moment of his time, as he waited on his new Luna. And it was that gray-eyed fault. If not for her, William would have taken her for a mate, and she would have been Winter Moon's beloved Luna. And now, some lanky beanpole was Luna. Camila had no idea where such a flat twig came from, or how she so easily won over William to get him to claim her, but it simply wasn't fair. She was the one who put in years of hard work. That place was meant for her, she earned it. But no, that gray-eyed wench just had to get her nose involved. Where did that leave her? A laughingstock, unable to show her face to any wolf. Someone looks like they're having a hard time. Camila stiffened, looking up as another woman sat across from her. The redhead was definitely a wolf. The fine lines around her eyes, not quite covered by concealer, indicated she was at least middle-aged for werewolves, perhaps in her 60s. Her aura was definitely sharpened by experience. "Did I say you could join me?" Camila sneered. Though the other's aura spoke of experience, it wasn't particularly potent indication they were probably not ranked. "Seems to me you need all the friends you can get," the other said with a smirk. "And who said we were friends?" Camila warily eyed her. "We might not be, but we do have a shared enemy, Blue Moon's Luna." Camila tried not to flinch, but the smile on the other she-wolf's face showed she failed. Glancing around the diner, she dropped her voice. "And what would you know about it?" "I know you lost your chance at being Luna because of her. Because of her, you were scorned and humiliated. Don't you want a chance at evening the score?" "What's it to you? What did she do to you?" Camila asked. "That's for me and my benefactor to know." "Benefactor?" "That's right. He has a vested interest in Blue Moon and he pays very well," the she-wolf said, taking out a small card and pushing it toward her. "If you accept his offer, follow the instructions on this card and wait for him to contact you." Camila glanced at the card, nearly choking on her coffee. "There? Why there? Now is not the time to be asking questions. If you want answers, you'll do as you're told, or you can keep wandering around until your money runs out." The she-wolf smirked and stood. "The choice is yours." Flipping back her hair, the she-wolf departed as suddenly as she appeared, leaving Camila to consider her options. Leaving the diner, the redhead turned down an ally and found a sedan waiting for her. She slid into the passenger seat, not looking at the driver or the passenger in the back. "Did you deliver the offer?" the passenger in the back asked. Though he was shrouded in shadow, a wolf's vision wouldn't have much difficulty seeing his features, which was why the she-wolf kept her gaze straight ahead. "I did, but do we really need her? She doesn't appear particularly bright. Pawns don't need to be bright." The she-wolf nodded. "As for your next assignment, you are sure you can get in without raising alarm?" "Of course. I still carry the pack scent." "Good, you know what to do." The driver slowly removed a small bag from his coat pocket and handed it to her without looking at her. Sniffing it, the she-wolf looked at the contents to see a mixture and dried herbs. "This will do the job?" "Of course. Even an alpha cannot resist. He'll be putty in your hands. Once his Luna feels the pains of his betrayal, she'll come running straight into my arms. That is, if you are sure you have no qualms about it." "Of course not. I've been waiting to take them down a few notches. Him and his mother," the she-wolf growled. "And I'm curious. I want to see just how much like dear daddy he really is." "Have as much fun with him as you like. Just get the job done, Delilah." "Of course," the she-wolf nodded before exiting. She walked past the vehicle and turned down another street to where her own car waited. A devilish smile spread on her features as she set the bag of herbs in the passenger seat beside her. It had been a long time since she left home, unable to remain in a pack that failed to support her, and an alpha that abandoned her all because his Luna appeared. She was the one who had been there on his lonely nights, not that ungrateful cow. And yet, he thought nothing to go running to the mate who could barely stand him. How was that fair? What was the moon goddess even thinking? Why were her efforts never acknowledged? So she left the pack seeking solace elsewhere, since the one she hoped to be her mate abandoned her. Delilah kept in touch with a few friends she left behind, at least until they found their fated mates. At first they sympathized with her about the unfairness of the whole situation. But once they were mated, they also turned their backs on her, claiming nothing was better than finding their fated mates. They claimed it would all make sense when she found hers, as if that was even possible. She never told them she already met hers when she was 18. He was an Omega, she was already dating the Alpha. How could she possibly accept such a downgrade? Later, she heard he took his own life, unable to bear the pain of the rejection. It didn't matter to her in the least. At least now her wolf would finally be silent. She figured it was only a matter of time before Jackson took her as his chosen mate. As months, then years went by and his fated mate never appeared. Instead, he took others to his bed, one after another. Even so, she knew he would come back to her. After all, they had grown up together. Then his mate finally appeared. He was so smitten with her, even though she was cold and aloof. Delilah heard rumors she caught him with another she-wolf at their first meeting, and he was trying to make up for it. Cackling with glee, Delilah waited for the arrogant she-wolf to leave. But she didn't, and Jackson continued to curry her favor. It was ridiculous. When another of his bed partners suggested they take matters into their own hands, Delilah immediately agreed. She thought their Luna would be an easy target, but she had put up a surprisingly good fight, even outnumbered. They finally overwhelmed her, and Delilah was all too happy to take her frustrations out on her. They might have even killed her if the Gamma didn't suddenly arrive. He flew into a rage and tore into all of them, snapping limbs and tossing them like rag dolls before ordering them all to be taken to the prison without so much as a thought to getting them medical attention. His only concern was for the Luna, who he swept up and rushed to the pack hospital. She didn't know how long they languished in their cells in excruciating pain as their wolves struggled to heal them. When Jackson finally returned, she expected justice. Instead, she met his cold rage. He took his time with each of them, forcing them to yield to their Luna or be cast out as rogues. They had no choice but to accept. Nora had been given the finest care and appointed guards. They never had another opportunity, and the others were content to keep their heads down. She bore the humiliation as long as she could, but the Luna ceremony was the final straw. Delilah couldn't take it anymore and put in a request to travel. At first, she thought Jackson would object, convince her to stay, but he didn't. He barely even looked at her when she presented the paperwork. Signing it without a word, he didn't even wish her a fair trip in his hurry to return to his Luna's side. It was galling, but what could she do? The final nail was when she learned the birth of his heir. It was salt in her wound. She never thought the day would come that she would be able to exact retribution. Then he showed up just when she had all but given up hope. Delilah didn't know how he found out about her or her past with Jackson, but he seemed to know quite a bit, and he finally offered her the one thing she wanted most: revenge. At first, all he asked for was information. She was actually getting bored with their arrangement, until a few days ago, when he proposed their next move. She hadn't been this excited in a long time. Finally, she was going to make that regret ever taking Jackson away from her. "Are we there yet?" Christina asked, even as she carefully maneuvered the jeep down the narrow access road. "Almost," Emily said. "How many kilometers in almost?" Christina asked. "And are we going to drive off the edge of the world before then?" Emily snorted, shaking her head. Christina was always so impulsive and impatient. Secretly, Emily thought it was her alpha blood that made her so impetuous. She would never say so aloud, as any mention of Christina's birth father almost always ended with an argument. Christina only acknowledged her one father, Gamma Raman. Emily could hardly blame her. Of the two, Raman was definitely the winner. Even so, she didn't think it was wise to ignore her past. It was like a silent killer slowly gnawing at her. Emily wished she would talk about it, or at least scream about it once in a while. "We're here." Emily announced as the jeep rolled to a stop in front of an old, decrepit gate. "Good guess," Christina huffed. Cutting off the engine, they stepped out and walked up to the rotting gate. An old, weathered sign hung from the top rail, the words barely legible, Parque Nacional de Mercantour. "I think we made a wrong turn." Christina studied the forest around them. "What turn?" Emily chuckled. "No, this is the right place." "What place? There is nothing here but trees and more trees." Christina scoffed, gesturing to the coniferous forests surrounding them. A slow mist rolled through, giving it an ethereal feel, but there was nothing mysterious or unusual about that at this elevation. "Didn't you pay attention to your cryptid lessons?" Emily admonished. Christina rolled her eyes. Though most packs made use of human schools for their primary education, they also supplemented it with lessons within the pack. Most of these lessons consisted of werewolf history and biology, as well as information on other supernatural beings, many of which humans still believed to be myths, despite the truth of the ones they knew existed. It was strange that humans knew werewolves and vampires were real, but still thought yetis and dragons were mythical. Yeah, Christina sighed, leaning against the grill of the jeep. "We shift into wolves and vampires become bats." "First of all, vampire can't shape-shift into bats or anything else for that matter," Emily said, leaning on the gate. "They can cast a glamour over themselves to change their appearance." Christina rolled her eyes. "Second, witches protect their covens by casting barriers to prevent them from being seen or sensed." "So, there's a barrier?" "Yep," Emily nodded. "You can feel it like static electricity. It makes the hair on your arm stand on end." Christina looked at her arm, rolling up her sleeve. "You can also smell it, ozone." Emily tapped her nose. The signs were subtle and easily overlooked, but obvious when you knew what to look for. She doubted a human would pick up on it, given their inferior senses and rampant skepticism. "So if there's a barrier, how do we get in?" Christina asked. "We don't. Not without a guide, unless you know how to manipulate energy fields." Christina sighed. In other words, they needed a guide. Aloud, she asked, "How do we get a guide?" "We wait until they invite us in. I hate waiting." "I know." Emily chuckled while Christina scowled. Her face was warm, but she wouldn't acknowledge the good-natured embarrassment. It was one of the things she loved most about Emily. No matter what situation they were in, she always had a quick wit and knew how to find the humor. Christina glanced around, unnerved by the strange silence. Turning back to Emily, she suddenly stiffened and growled. Emily looked over her shoulder to see a young woman standing in the middle of the path beyond the gate. She was no judge of human ages, but the woman looked to be in her 30s or 40s. Her long black hair was braided to the side, and her clothing was homespun and colorfully dyed. An amulet hung from her neck, and the smell of herbs wafted around her. "Ah, hi," Emily greeted. "We're here to see our Reverend Mother. She's been expecting you. Follow me." They hesitated as the unknown woman turned and walked back the way she came. When they didn't follow, she paused and looked back at them. "You're wolves, aren't you? Surely you know how to heal." Christina growled, earning a nudge from Emily. They ducked under the gate and caught up to their guide, who turned around and continued on the path. The air grew heavier, and the mist thickened. Christina shivered with the uncomfortable feeling of being closed in. She hated small spaces. When she was little, her mother often stuffed her under the cot to keep her out of sight from her father when he visited before they were rescued from the nightmare. She could never forget that day. Her mother tried to stuff her under the cot, but she refused. She couldn't stand the thought of being in that small space again. Trembling in fear, she sobbed for her mother not to punish her anymore. Her mother was desperate to hide her, sensing her mate was coming. That was how Christina met her biological father face to face for the first time as he stared into the tiny cell. He was domineering, tall, and good-looking, in a dangerous sort of way. But that first impression didn't last long, as a cruel grin replaced his scowl. He approached slowly, as if he was stalking prey. Her mother shoved Christina behind her, but he quickly tossed her aside like trash. "So this is what you've been hiding from me. Well, little one, want to have some fun with Daddy? We'll make Mommy watch." "No!" her mother screeched, rushing at him, claws extended. Christina was shoved to the hard floor, bumping her elbow. She whimpered in pain, looking for her mother, only to see her father beating her mother bloody. A scream tore out of her, but he wouldn't stop. And then he arrived. Christina had no idea her father was hosting the Alpha and Gamma from another pack, and certainly didn't know they were wandering around on a tour. Ramon was on the shorter side, broad in the shoulders. He filled the doorway for a moment before charging in, partially shifting as he ripped her parents apart and wrung her father like a dish rag. He swept up her mother in his arms and gently took Christina by the hand, leading her out of the small dark cell for the first time in her life. She barely understood what was going on, but Ramon took them to the hospital, forcing the doctors to treat her mother and demanding food for her. For the first time, she had a full stomach and fell to sleep in his lap and the safety of his arms. "Easy," Emily soothed, caressing her arm. Christina sucked in a breath, unaware she was close to hyperventilating. When she was younger, she suffered from panic attacks and intense claustrophobia. Her reactions were less severe now, but odd things occasionally set them off, like witch barriers, apparently. Taking a deep breath, she suddenly found the air clean and fresh. She blinked, looking around, then realizing they stood in a large field with small thatched cottages sprinkled throughout each with a garden and the occasional horse, goat, or sheep. Christina came to a sudden halt, glaring at the scenery around her, completely dumbstruck. She looked at Emily, expecting the same kind of awe, only to be met with a smirk. It seemed her mate expected this. Frowning, Christina narrowed her gaze in expectation of an answer. "You really never paid attention in school, did you?" Emily chuckled. Christina rolled her eyes before marching ahead to catch up with their guide, who patiently waited for them. She seemed as amused by Christina's reaction as Emily, but also concerned. However, she said nothing as she led them onward to one of the cottages. "Here you are. The Reverend Mother is waiting for you," she simply stated before leaving them. Christina hesitated, looking at the rather simple structure. It certainly didn't speak of importance or reverence. In fact, it looked like every other cottage. The only difference was the organization of the garden that made each cottage somewhat unique. "So, do we knock?" Christina asked. Emily shrugged in response. Even she didn't know the particulars of Wiccan society, as they tended to seclude themselves from the rest of the world. "It's not polite to stand in doorways," an aged voice suddenly called out. "Come in, wolves, or stay outside and be gone. I don't have all day." Sharing a surprised look, the pair let themselves in. The cottage was just as small inside as it looked outside. It consisted of a single room with a dirt floor. In the back, a wooden platform remained swept clean with a rolled-up bed and short table where one could kneel and eat. In the center of the room was a small fire pit, with an iron pot set over it quietly bubbling away over the warm embers. The walls were crowded with roughly made shelves laden with jars and bottles, wooden bowls and bundles of dried herbs, feathers of varying color, even rocks of various sizes and shapes. Iron pots and pans were arranged in one small corner where there was also a counter for food preparation. Surprisingly, there was a small fridge as well, though Christina had no idea how it was running. She didn't hear the telltale rumble of a generator or smell fuel. Solar, perhaps. "Well, are you going to sit?" Christina jerked to attention and looked again at the fire pit. There an old woman sat quietly stirring the pot and studying them with equal amounts of apprehension and amusement. Like their guide, her clothing was homespun and brightly dyed, though the dim light of the interior made the color dull overall. Just as with their guide, it was difficult to judge her age. Witches aged slower than humans, but not nearly as slow as wolves or vampires. Christina guessed her age to be in her 60s, but she could certainly be in her 70s or 80s. "Aren't you going to sit?" she asked, gesturing to the mats on the floor around the fire. Belatedly, they realized there was no furniture aside from the table, no chairs and no benches. Sharing a glance, they warily joined their host and sat cross-legged on the floor. The old witch nodded, still stirring the concoction in the pot. "Is that some sort of potion?" Christina asked. "Stew, it's nearly dinner time. You are late." Emily smirked. Christina shot her a disgruntled look. With all the herbs contained in the small space, it was exceedingly difficult isolating any one scent, which was enough to unnerve any wolf. The old witch softly chuckled. You can call me Juniper. Now then, what can an old witch like me do for a pair of wolves?" "Shouldn't you already know that? You were expecting us," Christina snorted. "It is the prerogative of the old to test youth," Juniper smiled. "Besides, I need to make sure you know the reason you are here." Christina opened her mouth to retort, but Emily quickly placed a hand on her arm before answering. "Several generations ago, a wolf king sought out a witch for consultation. Any record of why or what information he gathered has long since been lost or destroyed. As this is the oldest coven remaining, we hoped he might have come here and that you would have records of the visit." "And why is this information important to you?" "The current king wishes to harm our Luna." "Ah," Juniper nodded. "Yes, a Luna is the heart of every pack, in many ways more important than the alpha." Christina and Emily let out an uneasy breath. It seemed the old witch had a working knowledge of wolf packs. Since Wiccan society itself was matriarchal, they hoped she would have sympathy for their Luna and be willing to help. Juniper paused before speaking again. "As you may know, every witch is born with a gift. Some specialize in barriers, others in protective amulets. Some can manipulate the elements and cast offensive magic, and others have the gift of foresight and divination. My great-great-great-great-grandmother was such a witch. It was her ability that allowed us to escape the persecution of the church. Toward the end of her life, a wolf sought her for consultation on a matter of great concern. Apparently his grandmother a gift of prophecy, unusual for your kind, but perhaps not for hers." Christina frowned and glanced at Emily to see she was equally confused. Just what did the old woman mean? It was highly unlikely his grandmother was anything but a wolf. Wolves very rarely found their fated mates beyond their own kind, though it had been known to happen occasionally. In a mixed pairing, there was no guarantee their offspring would be a wolf. It was a 50-50 chance. "As for what he discussed with my grandmother, I cannot say," Juniper said. "It is the code of those with prophecy never to make a record of their insights and never discuss the prognostications they provide. So we came all this way for nothing," Christina sighed, moving to get up. "Don't be so impatient, Wolf. I'm not finished." Christina settled back down with a huff. She stifled an actual growl, having been raised to respect her elders. The witch in front of her certainly had the weight of experience to hold her ground even in front of a werewolf in their prime. I don't know what they discussed, however, when the wolf left my grandmother passed these words to her daughter, instructing her to pass them down to her daughter, Juniper said. "She said one day someone would come and ask about the king, and when they did, we should tell them these words. The line will end with the white, and a new line will begin with the silver." "What is that supposed to mean?" Christina asked. "I have no idea." "It was a prophecy made for you," Juniper said. Christina wanted to argue, but Emily held her back. "Thank you, Reverend Mother. You've been very helpful." The witch nodded as they stood and took their leave. Still confused, Christina trailed after her mate, who was deep in thought. Emily had always been the most intellectual between the two of them and loved puzzles. There was nothing she loved more than a good brain teaser. No one tried to stop them as they followed the trail back the way they came. Though they needed a guide to enter, leaving was a far simpler task. Christina shivered as they neared the barrier. She wasn't looking forward to walking through it again. "Excuse me, Wolf." Christina turned with a growl to see their guide had returned. The witch hesitated a moment before stepping forward. She draped a woven necklace over her head and settled it around Christina's neck. Confused, Christina gripped the white, shiny stone nestled in the net-like holder. Raising an eyebrow, she looked at the witch. "My specialty is amulets and charms," the witch smiled. "Selenite is protective and cleansing. There is much in your past that causes you pain. Until you confront it, it will continue to haunt you. Our experiences shape us, but they do not control us. Let the resentment and pain go. Not for benefit of the ones who hurt you, but for yourself. They cannot hurt you anymore, not if you do not give them the power." Christina stiffened, biting her tongue. How could this stranger know so much about a past she never spoke about? "You don't have to forgive or forget, but let it go," the witch gently intoned before stepping away and leaving them. Christina watched her retreating form as her gaze blurred and her cheeks felt damp. Reaching up, she wiped away the tears that came unbidden. She hated feeling helpless or weak, and tears always made her feel that way. But these ones, for some reason, didn't. They didn't feel hopeless at all. Chris? I'm fine, Christina turned back to her mate. Remarkably, she actually did feel fine. Gripping the iridescent stone around her neck, Christina followed Emily through the barrier. From this side, it didn't feel as oppressive as before. They found their jeep exactly as they left it. The woods were just as thick as before, with a slow-moving mist rolling through. It was as if their interlude in the coven never happened. Well, I don't know about you, but that was a waste of time, Christina said. Emily paused at the passenger door with a pensive expression. Maybe not. What do you mean? Nothing that witch said made any sense. The line will end in white, and a new one begins in silver, so? What line? What's white and what's silver? It's us. What? Well, not us, but wolves. I don't follow. Chris, really? Emily shook her head. White wolves and silver wolves. Come on. So what? They are both super rare, big deal. They are rare, but we know both, Emily reminded. Christina hesitated. That's right. They did know of a white and a silver wolf. What were the chances of that? The line will end with the white, Emily said. The princess is a white wolf, and she's the youngest of the king's progeny, and neither of the princes or the princess have pups. The line is the royal line? Christina hesitantly surmised. But what about the last part? It says a new one will begin in silver. A silver wolf, Emily nodded, and our Luna just had her heat cycle. Christina's mouth dropped open. You mean Jason and Phoebe? They stared at one another before declaring in unison, We need to get home. They practically leapt into their vehicle. Christina spun in her seat, looking out the rear window as she reversed down the trail as it was too narrow to turn around. Beside her, Emily tried her phone, only find it had no service. Damn it, she cursed. Are we sure about this? Christina asked. I mean, really? Jason is our new king? You have a better interpretation? No. It explains why the king is so fixated on silver wolves, Emily explained. All he cares about his bloodline continuing, but it isn't destined to. People in power never willingly give up that power. Yeah, but the king doesn't have any real power, Christina scoffed. In his mind he does. Just hurry up and get us out of these mountains. We need to get somewhere with service so we can warn them. They need to know. The Luna must be protected at all costs. We'll never get there before they make their move, Christina said. And if they figure out we know, it will probably spur them into action. I'll send a message to my brother. He can warn them ahead of us and get us a flight home. The royal family is probably watching Blue Moon, but it won't be watching his pack. Hurry up. I'm going. Ben is going to shit kittens when he finds out about this. Better him than the alpha. Christina grunted, reaching an area where the trail widened, and quickly whipped the jeep around. The vehicle practically growled as she jammed her foot on the accelerator. Emily gritted her teeth, enduring the G-forces. Once they were straightened out, she tried her phone again. Delilah stood off to the side, just outside the kitchen, cursing her luck. As expected, returning the pack hadn't been an issue. Since she was still a part of it, she could access the link, though it was frayed and the collective pack scent rather stale, as she hadn't been among them for quite some time. Originally, she planned to sneak into the kitchen to prepare her gift to the alpha herself. Unfortunately, she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw Myra. The older she-wolf would definitely recognize her, and she certainly wouldn't let Delilah wander around. She had no choice but to wait in the wings for an opportunity. Delilah hoped Myra would wander off, but the kitchen Omega was content to put her around with the others. She didn't know the reason for the jovial mood, but the other Omegas gossiped how Myra's niece had found her fated mate. Delilah vaguely remembered the young she-wolf, but couldn't even recall her name. It was of little interest to her anyway. I have the Alpha's tea ready per the Luna's request, a young Omega announced. Very good, Myra nodded. Delilah eased away from the door as the Omega pushed out a tea trolley laden with a tea set that looked quite old, which was unusual since neither the previous Alpha or Luna drank tea. They had always preferred the caffeine jolt of coffee, as most werewolves did. She waited until the server was almost at the lift before she struck, hitting her over the back of the head. The Omega crumpled, having no defense. Delilah dragged her inert body into the closet, not bothering to see if she was all right before taking command of the trolley. Pushing it onto the lift, Delilah sighed relief. Finally, her plan was going accordingly. Taking out the bag she had been given, she dumped the contents into the teapot. Hopefully it would have enough time to reach full potency. She hadn't the slightest idea how to make tea. Sighing, she straightened her old uniform. It had been years since she last wore it, decades, and she noticed the uniforms had changed. She hoped the Alpha wouldn't notice the difference. The lift doors opened, and she pushed the trolley down the hall. There were definitely more guards about, even within the pack house. This was certainly information her benefactor could use, but she had to wait to contact him after she completed her current task. Delilah couldn't help the smile that crept into her face. She was going to enjoy this. Knocking on the door, she waited for permission to enter. She found Alpha Jason alone at his desk going over paperwork. It was remarkable how much he looked like his father. How many times had she met Jackson in his office for a quickie to take the edge off his stress while he worked? Glancing at the other desks, she assured herself he was alone. Evidently, the Beta and Gamma were off on other tasks. Jason looked remarkably calm behind his desk. Jackson hated paperwork, but Jason seemed at home. He hardly looked up as she approached, while he read various proposals. "The Luna sent tea," Delilah said. He grunted, and she wasn't sure if he even heard her, but he also smirked. It seemed his Luna liked to send him gifts. A note of envy pierced her, but also hardened her resolve. She poured the tea and set the cup on his desk. Jason barely acknowledged the Omega pushing in the tea trolley. Several weeks ago, Phoebe started a campaign to get him to drink tea, saying it would help him relax. In truth, he was quite relaxed. Prior to meeting Phoebe, Lobo would restlessly prowl the back of his mind, distracting him and slowing down the work he needed to do. Now his wolf simply went to linking with his mate and left Jason to work in peace. Like most werewolves, Jason preferred coffee and the energy spike it gave, but he couldn't say no to his Luna. The Omega poured a cup and set it on his desk. He sighed, picking it up. The sooner he drank, the sooner he could get back to work. His wolf stirred lazily. An odd scent invaded his nose as he gulped down the cup's contents, only to suddenly reel back from the astringent flavor. It was so bitter he struggled to keep it down. In the back of his mind, Lobo let out a snarl before the connection was snuffed out. Jason leaned back in his chair, suddenly feeling lightheaded. He tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't form words. His mind couldn't shape coherent thoughts, and the world became indistinct and fuzzy. And yet scent became even more pronounced, overwhelming his nose as his nostrils flared, sensing a female in full arousal. His chair was pulled away from the desk and spun around. A voluptuous form filled his view as she leaned forward. She said something, but her voice seemed muffled and strange. Her scent, though, was all too obvious. "What's the matter, Alpha?" Delilah coyly smiled. Jason waved a hand in front of his face. Gel. Too bitter? Gel. "That's right, let this angel give you some sugar." Delilah leaned forward, capturing his mouth and shoving her tongue into his mouth, swallowing whatever protest he was trying to mumble. Her tongue swirled in his mouth and twisted around his before she pulled out playfully, biting his lower lip in the same way that used to drive Jackson crazy. Jason shook his head, raising a hand as if trying to swat a fly. His eyes were dilated and his nostrils flared. "That's right, baby. We are going to have a lot of fun." Delilah cooed, "All right. All of you into the music room." Phoebe laughed, herding the pups in front of her for their next lesson. As she stood, a wave of dizziness suddenly assailed her. Placing a hand on the wall, she waited for the moment to pass. "Luna?" Garrison asked, stepping close to steady her. "What was that?" "Trouble," Monty stirred. "Something's wrong with mate." "What?" "Get to mate, but Jason is working. Get to mate now." "Luna?" Phoebe shook her head and hurried down the corridor. She just managed to read the stairs before a sharp pain suddenly pierced her, shattering her heart. Crying out, she sank to her knees. This pain, she could never forget it. Betrayal. But Jason would never— "Mate!" Monty whimpered. "Luna, are you all right?" Garrison rushed forward. Snarling, Phoebe batted away his hand, forced herself onto her shaking feet and up the steps. Monty was clawing at the sides of her mind. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Delilah yanked on Jason's pants. She smiled wickedly. It seemed he inherited quite a bit from his father. "We are going to have so much fun." She sauntered forward, reaching for him, eager to see if he tasted anything like his father. Suddenly, the door burst open, slamming against the wall, and Delilah cursed the fact she forgot to lock it. "Get out!" She turned, expecting another Omega. Instead, a petite, pretty wolf with silver eyes stood in the doorway. Her eyes shimmered so bright they practically glowed as she strode into the room. The air suddenly shifted, becoming almost stagnant in its oppression. Delilah found herself frozen, unable to move or speak as the she-wolf stalked forward. The newcomer raised her hand, slapping Delilah so hard she practically spun around before stumbling back into a bookshelf before collapsing on the floor. Without a word, Phoebe turned to Jason to see him partially undressed. She was ready to demand an answer as he sat waving a hand as if warding off a shadow. "Angel?" "Jason?" He shook his head as she approached. He waved his hand in front of him, unable to focus. Cupping his face, she stared into his eyes to see they were dilated and unfocused. Jason groaned as the tingles of the mate bond calmed his agitation. "What is wrong with him?" "Drugged," Mani said. "Drugged?" Phoebe glanced at the desk to see the teacup. Her attention turned to the trolley to see her mother's tea set. Picking up the teapot, she lifted the lid and sniffed, reeling back from the bittersweet stink. Phoebe set it down and spotted a plastic bag tucked under the serving tray. She picked it up and hesitantly sniffed. Jasmine, passion flower, coriander, and mandrake? Makes sense, Mani huffed. "What do you mean?" "Jasmine is an aphrodisiac." "Oh, yeah." Phoebe nodded, recalling the time a fellow she-wolf had wanted something to improve her mate's performance and asked Phoebe for a special tea blend. "So they drugged him with an aphrodisiac to make him cheat on the bond? Who? Why?" "Are you really asking that after everything that is going on?" "Angel," Jason groaned. "Shh." Phoebe cupped his face. The bond seemed to calm his agitation. Lipstick was smeared across his lips, prompting her to grab tissues and wipe it off in disgust. "Luna?" Phoebe looked up to see Garrison standing in the doorway, confused at what he was witnessing. "The alpha's been poisoned." "What?" Garrison jerked to attention. "Some sort of aphrodisiac in his tea," Phoebe explained. "Take that thing away. Lock her in maximum security and alert the beta and gamma. Have them figure out how she even got here without raising alarms." "Yes, Luna." Garrison hurried forward, seizing the naked she-wolf and dragged her toward the door. "What about the alpha?" "I'll take care of him. Close the door. He's not in any condition to be seen by the rest of the pack." With a nod, he departed, leaving her alone with Jason, who began whimpering and reaching for her. Phoebe sat in his lap, hoping her nearness would calm him like it usually did. His arms wrapped around her, and he buried his face in her neck, sniffing and groaning. She could feel his growing arousal as his hands caressed her, seeking her skin. "What should we do? Should we take him to the hospital?" "Won't do much good, not like there is a cure for herbs. Besides, there are too many females there. I think he's starting to feel feverish. It might be triggering a rut. So what should we do? Have him sedated? Well, we could always, Mani." "What?" "It might help him burn out the herb's effects faster." Jason groaned. His head felt like it was splitting in two, and his mouth seemed full of cotton. Was this what a hangover felt like? He wasn't sure. Gentle fingers laid a cold compress on his forehead, and he sighed, catching the soothing scent of lilac and sage. "Phoebe, I'm here." Her fingers caressed his cheeks, and he risked opening his eyes. Strangely, they didn't seem overly sensitive to light. He lay on the office couch, while Phoebe perched on the edge, watching him with concern. "Hi." "Hi, yourself." Phoebe forced a strained smile. "Something wrong? Why do I feel like I've been on a 3-day bender?" Jason asked slowly, taking stock of his condition. "And why am I naked?" Phoebe bit her lip, trying to stifle a chuckle before asking, "What do you remember?" Jason frowned at her attempt to evade his query before considering hers. His frown deepened as he struggled to recall recent events. I was working at my desk, and someone from the kitchen brought me tea, and it tasted awful. And then," he struggled to recall the face surrounded by red hair. She was dressed in a uniform similar to the kitchen staff, but it wasn't quite right. It was faded and an older style. In fact, the she-wolf was also older. She had to be close to Myra's age, so it was strange she would be given a menial task like delivering tea. She leaned over him, but he couldn't recall what she said. Then she kissed him. And then Jason's eyes widened as he recalled fragmented memories of kisses and caresses. No, it couldn't be. He didn't. Phoebe, I didn't. I know, Phoebe nodded as he tried to sit up. She gently pushed him down. You didn't. I didn't? No, Phoebe assured him before reaching for a bag containing waterlogged herbs. This is the tea she gave you. It's hard to tell all the ingredients, but it definitely has jasmine, passion flower, and mandrake in it. Which means jasmine and passion flower are aphrodisiacs, and mandrake is a poison that would put you in an alternate state. So I was drugged with tea? Why? So that you would betray our bond, Phoebe nodded, setting the bag on the coffee table. But I didn't, right? I felt something was wrong, Phoebe said. I got really dizzy, and Monty said you were in trouble. I was halfway here when I felt the pain. Phoebe, she held up a hand. It's probably when she kissed you. When I got here, she was working on undressing you. But you got here before. Phoebe nodded, seeing relief ease his expression as he let out a slow breath. She could only imagine the guilt that would have consumed him if she hadn't managed to interrupt them. Even now she felt it gnawing on his conscience, trying to figure out how he should have prevented it. If you stopped her, why am I naked? Jason suddenly asked. The tea was pretty potent and you started getting feverish as it triggered a rut, and there really isn't an antidote for herbs. And Mani thought some activity would help you burn off the effects sooner. Are you saying you took advantage of me? Jason asked, smirking at her rambling answer. Maybe a little, Phoebe admitted, fighting a blush. In truth, it was mostly a rather fevered makeout session, but her scent and contact did keep him calm. Mate was glorious. Lobo suddenly piped up. Oh, so you are alive? What do you remember? Everything, Lobo huffed. I couldn't communicate, but I was aware of everything. So when that she-wolf kissed me, I wanted to rip her throat out, but I couldn't come forward. Something wrong? My wolf, Jason sighed. He says our connection was cut off. He was aware of everything happening, but he couldn't come forward. Must be an effect of the herbs. Phoebe nodded. Mani said she was having trouble linking with him, too. Jason ran a hand through his hair. There was a deep frown on his face as he refused to look her in the eye. She felt his guilt slowly gnawing at him. Jason, Phoebe gently turned his face toward hers and waiting for him to finally meet her gaze. When I got here, you were waving your hand like you were trying to fend her off, and you kept calling my name. I did. Angel. You kept repeating it, over and over. You were getting agitated, and you didn't calm down until you felt the mate bond when I held you and when you smelled me. That was the only thing that calmed you. Really? Phoebe nodded, stroking his cheek. She leaned forward, brushing her lips against his as light as a butterfly. Even drugged and disorientated, you only wanted me. His arms settled around her, holding her close. He breathed deep, filling his lungs with her scent, saying, There is no one in this world who can compare to you. Why would I wish for anyone else when I have perfection? Phoebe snuggled against him. She had been ready to sink into despair when she felt the pains of betrayal. If not for Mani's urging, she might have succumbed, but her wolf had been right. Jason would never betray her. He kissed the top of her head. I love you, Phoebe. I love you, Jason. He sighed, savoring her words. No one would come between them. No one would steal her away from him, which led his thoughts back to the she-wolf. There was little doubt in his mind who sent her, but who was she? How did she even get close to him? He frowned, trying to recall when she was close before the tea took effect. There hadn't been anything strange about her scent, nothing that alerted him she didn't belong there. Jason? That she-wolf? Where is she? Jason couldn't keep the growl out of his voice. Maximum security, Phoebe said. I ordered no one to go near her until you recovered. Luke and Ben were trying to figure out how she got into the territory without raising alarms. Right. Then I need to go and wring my answers out of her before I snap her neck. His eyes swirled amber as Lobo strained against the edges of his mind. Yes, that pay for hurting mate. All right, Phoebe slowly pulled away. Do you think you want to get dressed first? Jason glanced down and felt his face heat up at her statement. He looked at her and found her fighting a smile. You are enjoying this, aren't you? Instead of answering, she turned and picked up a pile of folded clothes. Jason raised an eyebrow as he accepted it. His memory was fragmented, but he was certain these were not the same ones he had before. Phoebe patted his cheek as she stood giving him space to change. She didn't have the fortitude to tell him she shredded his other clothes, enraged by the other she-wolf's scent on them. Jason quickly changed, wondering at her subdued attitude. Did something happen while he was still out of it? Even his wolf seemed uncertain, or at least uncomfortable. What happened? Lobo softly whimpered. Clothes smelled like she-wolf. Mate not like it. Oh, that made sense. Wolves were very territorial, especially over their mates, and most especially when they were high-ranked. Considering recent events, he could understand if she felt threatened by the she-wolf's scent and wanted to erase it. If their roles had been reversed, any male scent near her would have driven him insane. Pulling on his shirt, he approached her. His arms encircled her, and he pulled her against his chest, letting his hands settle naturally on her stomach, where their pup was growing. Bowing his head, he nuzzled her, growling possessively, and felt her relax. I belong to you. Angel. Only you. Her hands moved to his, entwining their fingers. It's only been a few days, not even a week, but Mani is almost positive I'm pregnant. Jason shuddered, catching his breath. He always heard she-wolves usually knew very early if they were pregnant, sensing the changes their body went through to accommodate the growing embryo. His heart hammered in his chest, and Lobo howled for joy. A pup. Their pup. He would protect them no matter what. Kissing the top of her head, he finally stepped away. Stay here. I'll be right back. No, Phoebe shook her head. If you're going to see that she-wolf, I'm going too. I don't want you anywhere near her. And I don't want you anywhere near her, Phoebe retorted, her eyes shimmering. Jason couldn't help the swell of pride in his chest at her possessiveness. She could take charge any time she wanted. He couldn't tell her no. All right, we'll go together. He took her hand and led her out of the office with one destination in mind. However, as he stepped into the hall, he was immediately embraced. A familiar scent invaded his nose as his mother hugged him close. Mom? Mom? Just Mom? Nora exclaimed. You've been out for 4 hours and all you can say is Mom? 4 hours? Jason repeated, glancing Phoebe. Did you forget to add something? I didn't want to overwhelm you, Phoebe said with a mischievous smirk. Overwhelm? So you left out the fact I was out for 4 hours, but you'll drop a bomb that we're having a pup? Before she answered, Nora suddenly exclaimed, A pup? Really? You know for certain? My wolf is pretty sure, Phoebe nodded. Oh my goddess, Nora clapped her hands. Lucille, standing next to her mother, exclaimed, I'm going to be an ant. Phoebe found herself enveloped in a double hug by the two she-wolves. Jason growled, reminding them to be careful with his mate, his very pregnant mate. Oh, would you stop? Lucille rolled her eyes. She's not made of glass. Not the point, Jason said through gritted teeth. We must celebrate, Nora decreed. Given all the tension, it was important to celebrate these milestones. The pack waited a long time for their alpha to have pups. Later, Jason gently extracted Phoebe from his mother. We have other business. Other business? Nora repeated. The she-wolf who infiltrated the pack and drugged him, Phoebe said. We're going to see her. I'm coming too, Nora declared without hesitation. Though they were keeping the details of the breach quiet, she had been given a full report of the incident. Jason sighed, didn't dare argue, considering how well the last one went. This confrontation was quickly becoming more complicated. They reached the prison without further incident. Luke and Ben were waiting for him, having been alerted through the mind link of his impending arrival. They met the group at the front desk before leading the way to the maximum security cells. Wisely, they asked no questions concerning the additions to the group. Has she said anything? Jason asked as they walked down the corridor of thick, silver-lined doors. Unlike the minimum security wing here, cells were meant to isolate their prisoners. They were soundproof and lined with silver to prevent the occupants from mind-linking or speaking with one another. The silver also suppressed their wolves and made them weaker. The she-wolf had been thrown into such a cell and kept there. No. Not a word, Luke answered. I don't recognize her, but she doesn't smell like a rogue, meaning she is a pack wolf. Her scent is somewhat familiar. It's hard to put a finger on it, but it doesn't raise the usual alarm bells that a stranger would. Jason frowned. It didn't make sense. Pack wolves carried a unique scent based on their pack, allowing them to be identified as a fellow member. If any unknown wolf attempted to cross their borders, the patrol would have immediately alerted them. But if this wolf didn't raise alarm with Luke, then it was unlikely the patrols would have been worried about her. Given recent events, it's pretty obvious who sent her, Ben continued. But I agree with Luke, it is disturbing how easily she entered our territory. I've heard of masking chemicals to disguise a wolf's scent, but they don't last this long, and they aren't very strong. Jason stifled a growl. He swore to protect Phoebe, and he just failed the first test. Somehow he underestimated the king's ability and influence. He was certain Phoebe was untouchable once she was in their pack territory, but if the king could extend his reach here? No, he wouldn't allow it. He would protect Phoebe and their pup with his life. They would be kept safe at all costs. Reaching the only occupied cell, Jason paused, nodding to the guard on duty. They were taking no chances with this she-wolf. He looked to Luke. What of her personal effects? Nothing in her uniform. Luke shook his head. They had barely been able to claim it with Phoebe in a possessive rage. We found an Omega server knocked out in the hall. That's probably where she got the tea and serving trolley. We also found her car, Ben added, late model sedan, but it was well kept and in good condition. We found her purse and luggage in the trunk. No identification, though. A cell phone, but it's currently locked. Can you crack it? Maybe. It'll be easier if we just get her to do it. Ness, Ben said, showing the phone. It was nothing special. Like her car, it was an older model, but not ancient. Looks like she used facial recognition. Jason merely nodded. Ben was more tech-savvy than him, so he trusted his gamma to figure it out. He looked again to the guard and nodded. The guard stepped forward, opening the small viewing window, before unlocking the door and stepping aside once the prisoner's position in the cell was confirmed. Jason stepped inside, Lobo pressing close as they viewed the she-wolf who dared interfere with their bond. She sat on the floor still completely naked, having been left in the condition she arrived. He didn't have any pity for her. Looking up, she sneered before her expression changed. She expected the beta or gamma, but now the alpha stood in front of her. His aura flared, pressing down on her like a vice. He stood over her, a towering vision of alpha perfection. She quivered with desire despite the situation. However, there was no desire or passion in his gaze. She saw only disgust and hatred as his eyes gleamed amber. His wolf had no sympathy for her either. In fact, she could feel its bloodlust. "Have you nothing to say?" Jason asked, choosing his words carefully. "What could I possibly say? You've already passed your judgment." He growled, but before he could retort, his mother suddenly exclaimed, "You!" She suddenly rushed past them to slap the she-wolf, leaving slashes across her cheeks as her claws involuntarily extended. Jason blinked, shocked by his mother's actions. She had never been violent, and he never sensed this kind of rage from her before. "You," Nora screamed. "You couldn't have my mate, so you dare play your games with my son." "Mate?" Jason repeated. Did she mean his father? Lobo seemed just as confused. "If not for you, he would have been mine," the she-wolf sneered. "We grew up together. We were meant to be together." Nora snarled, ready to strike again, when Phoebe suddenly seized her hand with a strength belied by her petite frame. She gently pulled her back and held her in a comforting embrace. Nora shook, unable to fight her quiet strength and aura. "Mother, you know this she-wolf?" Jason asked for clarification, though he was certain he knew where this was going. "She's one of your father's bitches, Delilah," Nora growled. "So that's the answer to the riddle," Jason said. "I should have guessed. Phoebe, please take my mother to her room. I'll handle this." Phoebe gave him a worried glance but nodded before guiding Nora out and back the way they came. "You too, Lucy," Jason said, not looking at his sister. She hesitated before trailing after the others. Though Lucille knew how their parents met, she didn't know the full extent of their mother's troubles with jealous she-wolves lurking around every corner. Given how close she had been to their father, Jason and their mother shielded her from the worst of it. "So, you are one of my father's sluts," Jason growled. "Well, that explains why you didn't raise alarms crossing our borders. You're still a member of this pack. though your scent and connection has gone stale. No wonder we didn't recognize you." "Makes sense," Luke agreed. She had been long gone before Jason took the role of Alpha. Though she never swore allegiance to her new Alpha, she was still technically a member of the pack. Ben frowned, taking out her phone and activating the facial recognition before centering the camera on her face. The phone opened, and he quickly fiddled with its settings so they could maintain access. "You are so much like your father," Delilah smiled. "You're wrong," Jason stepped forward. "I'm nothing like my father." "How do you figure?" She shivered in anticipation as he crouched close. "Are you going to force me to pledge allegiance to your Luna too? So you can come back and play your games with my son?" Jason sneered. "What makes you think you'll live to see another day?" He gripped her chin, jerking her head to the side, and snapped her neck with no remorse. Jason stood accepting a towel to wipe his hands free of her scent. The surprised look on her face was laughable. "No one who threatens my Luna will be allowed to live," Jason said. He turned away from the slumped form and quietly exited the cell. Glancing at the guard, he said, "Dispose of that trash." The guard bowed as Jason walked away, trailed by Luke and Ben. Neither of them spoke a word. Jason's aura fluctuated with his churning emotions. In the span of a few hours, he had been drugged and almost forced to betray his bond with his Luna, just when he was looking forward to becoming a father. Now he learned it had all been because of his father. It was as if his father was trying to sabotage him from the grave. "Luke, track down my father's other playthings," Jason growled. "I want them all accounted for." "Right," Luke agreed. If there was any chance of restlessness within the pack, they were the most likely sources. He recalled his father mentioning the she-wolves in passing, and something about a file, though he never thought about it before. Like this she-wolf, they had been allowed to fall into obscurity, but no more. They could not afford to allow themselves to be blindsided again. "Ben, I want you to go through her phone. I want to know where she's been and everyone she's been in contact with." "Right," Ben nodded. "And increase patrols," Jason said. "We don't know how much information she might have compromised." "Right," Luke agreed. "She's been out of the pack for a while. I doubt she had any current information about the state of the pack." "We don't know how much she knew," Jason answered. "She has been allowed to come and go as she pleased. Double-check everything." Luke and Ben nodded. He had a point. There was no telling how large the potential breach was. They would have to investigate it closely and track her moments as best they could. Leaving the prison, Jason paused, breathing deep, wishing the cool, clean air smelled like Phoebe. Her scent always calmed him. Lobo paced the back of his mind, unsatisfied with the she-wolf's quick death, and longed to sink his teeth into something. "Maybe you should go talk to your mother," Luke hesitantly suggested. Jason growled. Anything to do with his father was a subject to be approached carefully. Jason's resentment ran deep. This was probably the worst possible turn of events. The royal family had no idea the fire they were playing with. Or maybe they did. Perhaps this was their intention to drive Jason crazy by taunting him with his father's failures. In either case, the question was what the royal family's next move would be now that their pawn was eliminated. This was certainly not their last act, yet Jason was not in the mindset for such careful deduction. "Go for a run, Jace," Luke finally urged. "We'll hold down the fort." "He's right. You need a clear head," Ben agreed. "Leave the rest to us, and leave your mother to the Luna for now. It'll be all right." Jason glanced at them the corner, so his mouth turning up slightly. They knew him too well. Turning to the woods, he gave Lobo control. His wolf practically leapt out of him and tore off toward the woods, leaving their clothes in tatters and not caring at all. That unbelievable," Nora muttered as Phoebe guided her back to the pack house and up to her suite. Lucille followed a step behind. Though she had been shielded from the worst of her father's indiscretions, she still knew about the she-wolves he used to keep prior to meeting her mother. She knew some of those she-wolves had attacked her mother while her father was away. Yet her father always proclaimed he dealt with them, and they were no longer a threat. So who was that she-wolf they left in the cells? She assumed dealt with meant death, but did her father not execute them for their crimes after all? Her brother seemed strangely calm, Did he know about the she-wolves' real fates this entire time? And her mother? Lucille watched as Phoebe guided Nora to the bed and made her lie down. "How could she?" Nora muttered. "How dare she target Jackson's flesh and blood? As much as she hated me, I know she respected him at least. Has she no conscience?" Phoebe retrieved a cool compress and soothing Nora the best she could. Lucille stood off to the side watching and trying to contemplate what her father had been thinking in letting such a she-wolf roam free. "Mom, did you know?" Lucille finally spoke when her mother grew quiet. Nora looked at her with a frown before saying, "That he let her go?" "Yes. He let all of them go after forcing them to swear loyalty to me as their Luna. He thought that would be enough to protect me." "But," Lucille prompted, "but when I became pregnant with Jason, one of them attacked me again and nearly killed me with Jason in my womb," Nora admitted. "Jackson executed her but didn't touch the others since they weren't involved in the second attack." "Why would he let any of them live?" Lucille demanded. "After what they did, they could have killed you." "They were members of the pack. Some of them were childhood friends," Nora said. "He didn't feel like he could kill them or banish them." Lucille frowned. "Childhood friends? That's why her father allowed them to live?" "Two of them met their fated mates," Nora said with a sigh. "Only two of them," Lucille repeated. "Delilah left the pack to travel," Nora said. "I have no proof, but I think she rejected her fated mate in hopes Jackson would claim her." "She did," Phoebe agreed. "I sensed it in the cell, though I don't know who her mate might have been. I haven't sensed any lost connections that would lead back to her. He might have left the pack, or he might not have been able to tolerate the bond breaking." "In other words, he killed himself," Lucille said. Phoebe nodded. Normally, a wolf spirit wouldn't even consider suicide and would protect their vessel should their human half attempt it. However, after a mating bond was forcibly broken, wolf spirits were greatly weakened, and some even longed for the pain to end any way it could, including hurting themselves or even death. Garrison sought death in taking dangerous missions. Perhaps it wasn't exactly the same as suicide, but he certainly wasn't fighting death and would have welcomed it. Fortunately, it had not come to that, and meeting his second-chance mate eased his suffering. Others were not so fortunate. Phoebe had the feeling Delilah's mate was in the latter category. "So he let her just leave?" Lucille scoffed. "I don't think he knew she rejected her fated mate, at least not at first," Nora said. "Whatever your father's faults, he did respect and cherish the bond. He never would have wanted any wolf to reject their bond. It pained him greatly to know she rejected her bond for him. That's not what he wanted." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Lucille asked. "Does Jason know? He does, doesn't he? That's why he refused to see Dad even when he was—" "Why tell him, and not me?" "Because I didn't want to ruin your relationship with your father like I did with Jason," Nora sighed. "After the second attack, I was so paranoid about protecting Jason from future threats, and I was so angry with Jackson for allowing it to happen. I thought I was doing Jason a favor by telling him. But it only put up a wall between them. If it wasn't for that wall, maybe handing the pack over to Jason wouldn't have been so hard on Jackson. He might have lived longer and got a chance to meet his grandpups. He loved being a father, and I took that away from him with Jason. When you came along, I didn't want that for you or him." Lucille bit her lip. "Lucille, your father loved you. Never forget that." She frowned before departing, unable to stay in the room any longer. Lucille trusted Phoebe to watch over her mother, but there was too much information for her to process to stay. She needed to be alone. "Let her go." Nora sighed when Phoebe tried to call her back. "This mess is Jackson's and my own fault. We could have done so many things differently, and now you are paying the price." "I really didn't suffer that much," Phoebe protested, taking her hand. "I know Jason would never willingly betray me. That's how I knew something was wrong. And I can feel his guilt even for allowing that much to occur. It was Jackson's greatest hope. Jason would find his Luna. You are everything he wanted for Jason. He would have loved you like a daughter. I just wish he and Jason could have mended things. Perhaps Jason wouldn't carry so much resentment, but he won't even look at his father's letter." "Letter?" Nora nodded to the bedside table. Phoebe hesitated before opening the drawer and removing the envelope addressed to Jason. She looked at Nora. Jackson was too weak to hold a pen, so he dictated it to me. Nora sighed. It's his final words to Jason. And he hasn't read it? No. He threatens to burn it whenever I bring it up. Phoebe didn't need their bond to know how deeply Jason resented his father. She couldn't blame him after all his mother suffered, but it was clear Nora had forgiven her mate. Phoebe wanted that same peace for Jason. They weren't certain what the future held, so grasping any sort of solace was important. She didn't want him or his wolf to suffer. Rest, Phoebe urged her mother-in-law. I think we've all had enough shock for the day. Phoebe, don't worry. Your children are strong and they aren't alone, Phoebe smiled. And neither are you. You don't have to bear the weight of the past on your own shoulders. Nora breathed deep smiles softly. My son is right, you are an angel. Phoebe patted her hand and remained with her until she fell asleep. With a sigh, she stood and quietly stepped out. Her mind reached for Lucille and sensed she had gone to her own room to process everything she learned. Phoebe hesitated, wanting to comfort her, but comfort was probably the last thing Lucille wanted. In the short time Phoebe had known her sister-in-law, she realized Lucille often hid her feelings behind bravado and racy comments. Others mistook her for being shallow and insincere when truth, she was actually very sensitive. An inappropriate joke wouldn't help her in this situation, however. She needed time to process this new side of a father she loved and cherished. When she was ready, Phoebe hoped she would seek her out to talk, but for now, Lucille needed some space. At the very least, she hoped Lucille would open up to Ben and allow her mate to soothe her once her thoughts settled. Phoebe studied the envelope in her hand. Right now, her main concern was for Jason. This incident stirred up the resentment he held for his father. She could feel his emotions churning through the bond. It felt like he was quite distant, and she realized he was probably trying to run off some of his pent-up rage. Phoebe frowned before turning on her heel and headed to the kitchen. It had been a while since she and Jason shared an intimate meal, just the two of them. That would change tonight, and hopefully it would bring his mind some peace. When Jason returned from his run, both he and Lobo were exhausted. It had been a long time since they reached their limit. A quick check-in with Luke confirmed the pack was well, most not even realizing there had been a breach. The Omega that had been attacked had even woken up not knowing how she ended up in the hospital. It was little comfort to Jason, who was still racked with guilt. Because of his negligence, Phoebe felt him betray her, however briefly. He had sworn to always be by her side. He had no idea how to make it up to her, or even how he would face her again. An apology just wasn't enough. To make matters worse, the she-wolf had been one of his father's trysts. Would the pain and betrayal his father caused never come to an end? Reaching his suite, Jason disappeared into the bathroom. He hoped to wash away the frustration, sweat, and pain. Sweat was easy, but the rest ran far too deep for him to ever be rid of it. The hot water did nothing to settle his thoughts. Stepping out of the bathroom in sweats and a towel over his shoulders, he roughly dried his hair before catching a tantalizing smell. Looking up, she saw the table set for two with cubed beef, potatoes, and vegetables in a thick wine sauce, almost like a stew. But even more tantalizing was Phoebe, as she carefully arranged their plates. She wore a thick cotton robe, but it didn't seem as if she recently showered. "Already?" she asked with a playful smile. "Ready?" Jason repeated, as she approached, gently pulling the towel off his shoulder and tossing it aside. "I thought we could have dinner together, just the two of us." "The two of us?" "Your sister is with Ben. Luke and Mona are watching over the pack, and your mother has the pups." Phoebe stepped away before shedding her robe. "Of course, if you don't want to." And Jason's gaze followed her every movement, suddenly going wide as she revealed the black satin negligee underneath. A possessive growl tore out of him as Lobo eagerly pressed forward to take it all in. She smiled, approaching him and running her hands up his bare chest. Jason shuddered as the bond sent sparks trailing throughout his body. Her fingers curled into the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him to her lips for a long, almost lazy kiss. Jason groaned at the sensations buzzing through his mind and body. "Is that a yes to dinner?" Phoebe asked, her hands caressing his arms before gripping his hands and leading him to the table. Jason couldn't speak. His mind was a riot of thoughts and desires warring for attention. Phoebe had never played the seductress, and he wasn't sure how to process what was happening, but he knew he wanted more. It felt like a dream as Phoebe gently pushed him into his seat before straddling his lap. His heart hammered in his chest, and Jason struggled to swallow a lump in his throat as she leaned close, kissing him deeply. "Do you like my little surprise?" Phoebe's voice flitted into his mind as she slowly eased back. A coy smile teased him as her eyes shimmered silver. "Phoebe?" She reached over to the table and picking up one of the plates heaped with the hearty stew. Jason groaned. The dinner looked and smelled fantastic, but it was nothing compared to the feast he wanted. Phoebe innocently speared a carrot and potato before offering it to him, as if she had not just been playing seductress a moment ago. "You are playing a dangerous game, Angel," he finally managed to speak. "What do you mean?" Phoebe asked. "You haven't had a proper meal all day, and you'll need your strength tonight." Her eyes shimmered mischievously, and the smell of her arousal permeated his nostrils, almost overriding the smell of their dinner. Jason groaned, wanting nothing more than to seize her immediately. Now, Phoebe teased. "Good boys get their dessert after they've eaten their vegetables." Jason couldn't quite stifle his growl as he snapped at the fork and slowly chewed. Phoebe smirked, feeding him the next mouthful. Jason dosed, propped up on the pillows. His exhaustion was one of utter rapture as the bond buzzed through his body. Phoebe laid on his chest, her fingers gently stroking the hair peppering his chest. His hand gently stroked her back and rear, loving the feel of her nightie, but also hating the single layer of cloth separating their bodies. Once he recovered, he would remove it and indulge in all of her. "Feeling better?" Phoebe asked. "Better?" Jason repeated as she looked up at him with a faint smile and blushing cheeks. "You mean this was all about trying to make me forget what You didn't do anything, Jason," Phoebe said, caressing his cheek as she sat up, straddling his torso to face him. "You were drugged and someone tried to take advantage of you, and even in that state, you tried to fight them off and protect our bond." Jason breathed deep, holding on to her words. "If you want to be angry at the ones who sent her." He growled, his eyes flashing amber. "That's right, the king sent that she-wolf. It had to be him. Or was it? It didn't seem like his usual tactic, but someone close to him." Phoebe watched him and sensed through the bond when he accepted her words. He didn't completely let go of his guilt, but she could tell it didn't consume him as before. She leaned forward, kissing his nose. Jason smiled, rubbing noses with her. Phoebe chuckled, pecking a kiss on his lips. "So this outfit," Jason cleared his throat, "is this what you've been hiding in that bag?" Phoebe blushed. "Any other surprises in there?" "Maybe," Phoebe smiled, running her fingers through his hair. The whole shopping excursion still brought her some embarrassment, but Lucille and Bridget managed to talk her into a few things. This was the first time she mustered the courage to wear any of it. Maybe she would wear more if it gave him this much joy. With a sigh, she pulled away. "There is one more thing." "Oh." Jason raised a brow, eager to find out what other surprises she had in store. Phoebe leaned over to the side table and pulled something out of the top drawer to hand to him. Jason stared at the envelope until his gaze fell on the words written in his mother's neat scrawl. "To my son." "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice taking a hard edge. "Your mother showed it to me." His hand gripped the envelope, crinkling it. "Now she's recruiting you." "Jason," Phoebe placed a hand over his, "you are not your father. You are better. But holding a grudge is not helping you. There is nothing that person could say that will change my mind." Jason snarled. "It's not supposed to," Phoebe said, surprising him. Jason blinked, staring at him. "It's not about him. It's about you and what holding on to your resentment is doing to you. How can I forgive him after what he did?" Phoebe shook her head. "It's not about forgiving him. It's about letting it go. After Graham rejected me, I held on to that hurt for years. It slowly ate away at me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to leave my room." Jason tensed, stifling a growl at the mention of her former mate. She stroked his cheek, soothing him. "I hated him so much, and it made me hate myself." Phoebe sighed. "I wondered what was wrong with me that he didn't want me." "Phoebe, there is nothing wrong with you." "I know, but it took me quite a while to get there," Phoebe smiled. Eventually, I learned to let him go. I didn't do it for him. I did it for myself because I was needed. Blake and Emma, the other pups, needed me. Jason let out a slow breath. He hated her thinking about her former mate and her past struggles, but she never showed a trace of emotion herself. Whenever she talked about it, there was always a disinterested tone to her voice, as if she was relating someone else's past. He hated her tone almost as much as he hated what happened to her. She should be angry. I was angry for a long time, Phoebe said, stroking her cheek. But that isn't a healthy way to live. So I moved on. I gave up hope of finding a second chance mate, which I shouldn't have done. But that didn't stop me from meeting you, did it? No. Jason leaned forward and nuzzled her. You made me chase you, but I didn't mind. You don't have to forgive your father, Phoebe said, but let go of your anger. I'd rather our pup didn't imprint on that. Our pup, Jason breathed, looking at the envelope partially crushed in his hand. Is there anything in there that will change who you are? Phoebe prompted, or change what we have together? No. Jason caressed her cheek and tucked a hair behind her ear. You are my everything. With a sigh, he straightened out the envelope and opened it before drawing out the paper inside. He wasn't certain if it was longer or shorter than he expected. Phoebe stroked his hair, letting him read at his own pace. He didn't need to, but he read it aloud, trying to keep his voice even. To my son, I made mistakes, I admit that. I never did right by your mother or you, and it nearly cost me everything. Even though you and your mother lived, I still lost you. I lost your mother's trust and your respect. There is nothing I can say that will change that, but I owe you the explanation you demanded from me. I always wanted my fated mate, longed for her, looked for her whenever I ventured someplace new. I already knew she was not a part of my pack. I didn't care what she was, alpha, beta, omega, rogue, or witch. It wouldn't have mattered to me. I wanted her and only her by my side, but I was not patient. I didn't wait for her. I indulged in other she-wolves to pass the time. The she-wolves I spent most of my time with were members of my pack. We grew up together, went to the same school. I considered them friends and later friends with benefits. My wolf wasn't happy with me, but my time with them meant nothing. Apparently, they didn't feel the same way. I don't know if I did not make the situation clear and misled them, or if they deliberately ignored it and misled themselves, but they thought I would settle for a chosen mate. That wasn't my intention, and I certainly didn't want any of them to reject their fated mates in hopes of being with me. I felt guilty for not making myself clearer. That's why I didn't banish them. I took so much from them, I couldn't take away their pack too. But it strained my relationship with your mother. Our bond was already so weak because of how we met. I'd give anything to take it all back. I wish I had your strength and patience so I could have given your mother the love, home, and mate she deserved. You are so much better than me. I know when you meet your mate, she will be your moon, your mate, and your Luna. She will be your everything because that is what you will give her. Everything. I don't deserve your forgiveness, so I will not ask for it. When you find your Luna, always hold her close and never let anyone stand between you and her. Love her, cherish her, and protect her with every fiber of your being. And give me plenty of grandpups. I only wish I could be there to hold them. I'll be watching over all of you from the moonlit fields. Love, your father. Jason sighed, slowly folding it and putting it back in the envelope. Phoebe's fingers stroked his hair as she watched him. She could feel his uncertainty through the bond. It was clear he didn't know quite what to think. Jason, Phoebe caressed his cheek. She knew this wouldn't be easy, and she didn't expect him to simply accept his father's admission, but at least he didn't have to wonder any longer. I can't forgive him, I won't. But he sounds like he regretted it. Jason said after a moment, You're right about hating him. The anger doesn't do me any good. I guess I can let it go. Phoebe nodded. It was more than she expected, and his words were probably more in service to her than himself. The feeling through the bond was one of confusion and contradictory, fleeting emotions he was struggling to process. But that was to be expected. Jason? Phoebe whispered, her face warm. The old man said to give him plenty of grandpups, Jason said. We should practice. A laugh burst from her as he caressed her skin, letting his eyes slowly roam her body, soaking in the soft blush that warmed her pale skin as his gaze lingered. She was still uncomfortable in her own skin, though she made such a tempting and effective seductress. "I love to watch you," Jason hummed, running his hands along her curves. "I've been good, haven't I? I deserve a reward, don't I?" Phoebe fought a laugh, pecking a kiss on his lips, only to follow it with a deeper kiss. Her wolf was never satisfied so long as their mate was willing. This wasn't what she expected after he read the letter, but perhaps she should have. His father's words and tone were shocking, and he needed time to process it without questions. "Phoebe," he sighed. She hesitated before rocking forward slowly, building up her pace as Mani encouraged her. This position always embarrassed her, but he liked giving her control. His smile widened as she lost her hesitation and her confidence returned. His angel, his everything. Goddess, she was beautiful. His father had never been more right. No one would take her away from him. No one would be allowed to come between them. He would protect his mate and their pup with his life. "Prince Nolan, the king requests your presence." Nolan looked at the messenger and nodded. There had been a strange tension throughout the palace for the last week. He heard his father tried to forcefully search Blue Moon's estate, only to be turned away at the gate, stating he had no authority to do so. And he didn't. Pack estates might technically be in the royal family's territory, but they were considered the territory of the individual pack, so the borders must be respected as such. That also meant they were exempt from searches without justifiable cause, as approved by the council. Nolan had walked past his father's office to overhear his father in a rage over the phone. "What do you mean, I don't have just cause? I'm telling you that is dangerous to us all. She'll destroy everything. I don't care if he has taken her for his mate. Jason has no idea what he's invited into his pack. It's for his own good. What do you mean, how do I know?" Since then, Nolan tried to avoid his father whenever possible. It wouldn't do him any good to attract his notice. Unfortunately, they still were unable to figure out why the king hated Blue Moon's Luna with such vigor, and he had no idea why his father wished to see him now. Reaching the office, he knocked before entering. There he found his brother sitting in their father's seat, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Akin?" Nolan hesitated. "I was told father wanted to see me?" "He had to go lay down," Akin chuckled. "The council wouldn't approve a war declaration against Blue Moon." "He actually tried that?" Akin snorted. "I would have requested a halt of trade or an investigation of their assets. They probably would have rejected that too. Blue Moon is, if nothing else, studious in its contributions and record-keeping. Their services are too valuable, and apparently that new silver healing bomb belongs to them, though how they came up with it is anyone's guess. I heard a pair of she-wolves invented it." "Yeah, right." Akin laughed. "Females are only good for one thing and one thing only." Nolan gritted his teeth to prevent himself answering. By now, he was inured to Akin's misogynistic and callous nature. According to what Nolan heard, one of the she-wolves who invented the bomb was none other than Blue Moon's Luna, but he didn't think that information would help this situation in the slightest. Clearing his throat, he said, "Well, if father is resting, I'll be on my way and see him later." "Hold on." Nolan paused, looking back at his brother. "Without father here, we'll be able to speak freely." Nolan gave his brother a curious look. "I don't suppose father told you why he wants the silver wolf dead?" "No, he doesn't tell me anything," Achin declared. "We have that in common. He used to be much more open until Selena's first shift." Nolan frowned. It was rare for Achin to be so thoughtful or curious. However, he was right. Their father had been delighted when their sister was born. But that was before Selena shifted. Their father's attitude changed immediately. He barely looked at her and couldn't stand to be in her presence. Whenever their mother praised her rare beauty, their father looked at her in disgust. But why? And now he was single-mindedly pursuing Blue Moon's Luna. "No matter what you think, it's strange," Achin said. "Agreed," Nolan nodded, seeing his brother's gaze gleam. "And you know why." "You're not the only one who had been digging," Achin shrugged. "Are you going to gloat or share?" "Neither," Akin said after a moment, "but you are going to challenge Jason for his position." You want me to challenge for the title of Blue Moon's Alpha? Nolan asked. Are you insane? Probably. Forget it. This is your chance to get on Father's good side. If you take over Blue Moon, you can hand him that she-wolf on a platter. If, Nolan emphasized, I'll never beat Jason in single combat. Nolan was no fool. A werewolf's aura was a measure of their strength, and Jason's far surpassed anything he had ever felt. Not even the king in his prime matched it, Nolan was quite certain. For him to step in the arena with Jason was suicide. You are a prince. Surely you are not afraid of a mere alpha, Akon teased. That isn't how it works, Nolan said. You know that. Jason isn't just some alpha. He's the alpha of Blue Moon. Ancient blood flows through his veins, not to mention training. His pack specializes in combat. Were you not watching when he slipped out of our territory right under Father's nose? We still don't know where he is. He's back in his pack and on his home turf. How do you know that? Does it matter? Akon smiled. What exactly are you planning? The less you know, the better, Achan said. All you need to know is your part. You are going to challenge Jason. Why? Look, if you win, you will have Father's eternal gratitude. You can ask him for anything. There's no reward he wouldn't be happy to bestow. You say that as if I actually have a chance, but no, I don't. So why should I pick a fight I have no hope of winning? Because it's the only way to keep your mate safe. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Your little ruse may have the old man duped, but you haven't been as careful as you think you've been. So you're planning to sacrifice me. Oh, please, I doubt Jason will actually kill you. So what is the point? The point is I don't need you to win. You just need him distracted, Nolan surmised. I'm the distraction for a different plan, right? As I said, the less you know, the better. Just do your part, and I won't tell Father about your mate. Nolan gritted his teeth. He wanted to deny it, but his brother was too confident. If Achan had any strengths, it was certainly his ability to sniff out secrets, no matter how deeply they were buried. Nolan had done his best not to leave a trail, but he should have known better. If Achan wanted to find out something, there was no countermeasure great enough to keep that information safe. In that sense, Jason was his greatest opponent. The Blue Moon Alpha made security his top priority, and as far as Nolan knew, Achan had never succeeded in infiltrating the pack either digitally or physically. No cyber attack managed to breach Blue Moon's firewalls, and no pack member would turn spy against their alpha. Had that changed? No. If An had an actual way into the pack, he wouldn't need to rely on Nolan as a distraction. Yet, it was strange Achan was sharing this much interest in anything, let alone something that concerned their father. Why are you so interested in Jason's Luna? Nolan asked. Achan's smile broadened, his eyes gleamed. Nolan couldn't help but think he looked like a cat playing with a mouse. Not a very flattering image for a wolf, to be sure. She intrigues me, Achan said. Nolan gave his brother a dubious look. Achan laughed. You have to admit you're intrigued, too. Such a plain, pretty little thing. She must be a tiger in bed. Nolan snorted. What? You saw how Jason was acting, nuzzling and sneaking kisses. A man like that doesn't act like that unless the female does him something fierce. Nolan shook his head. I don't think you understand the mate bond at all. Oh, please, I know all about it. I had a mate, remember? Yeah, I do. Nolan winced at the memory of the delicate young Omega. She didn't stand a chance. If fated mates were meant to bring out the best in each other, the Omega was meant to bring out Akon's gentleness and compassion. It might have even worked if he hadn't dosed himself with wolfsbane to prevent his wolf from stopping him. The Omega didn't last one night. Nolan wished that was the worst thing he ever witnessed, but it wasn't. I wonder if Jason's the sort of wolf who prefers a dominant partner or a submissive one. I'd love to find out. Something tells me she's feisty. I like when they have spirit. Nolan warily eyed his brother, and picked up the phone on the desk and held it out to him. But first, you need to make a phone call.